This video will cover emerging issue surveillance using publicly available data from NHTSA complaints database to get early warnings on emerging issues and get an idea of customer sentiment that results from some of these issues or that could result from some of these issues. We'll start here. There's about 3 different tabs here that encompass the main points of this dashboard. The first one is a relatively static display of the top 10 counts of complaints across different brands, as well as how the distribution of those brands in the complaint changes over time. Given that part of what we're interested in when we're talking about customer complaints is customer sentiment and how customers will perceive the brand, I thought it would be an interesting endeavor to look at the vehicles that I own in the context of these complaints and warranty claims. Over the past 5 or 6 years, we've researched and purchased 2 different cars, and like the very exciting engineers that we are, we ended up with a Prius, which we essentially treat as a small pickup truck, and a Chevy Bolt. So with that in mind, let's just see what happens if I as a consumer go and research my first vehicle. Let's look at Prius reliability. And I think it's not uncommon for people to start looking anecdotally at things like social media nowadays. It's also hard to find a lot of long-term implications about vehicle performance. So that one of the very first things that comes up when you type in reliability is there a downside in a specific year, which I think is really common. Are there model years that I should avoid if I want to buy this car? Let's scroll through here and we'll focus on some of the top level comments. And one thing that we see is, yeah, Priuses are generally reliable, but some of the earlier generations have major oil burning and head gasket problems. We scroll here. General complaints about Priuses not being very exciting. And then we see our first comment here that specifically points to different model years. And the more research you do, the more you'll see that you should tend to avoid 2010 and 2011s. It's sort of common lore that 2010 was the first year of a redesign. There are a number of issues with both the 2010 and 2011 models. The first thing to look at here is, does the data support this? Will I see the same kind of reliability issues if I look at this holistic view? And we have this dashboard here where I can look at a specific make and model. So for a Ford, I can look at all of the issues over all the models, or I can say, I just want to look at F-150s and see generally where the problems tend to be, if there's any model years I should avoid. And right away here, we're able to see that maybe there are some powertrain issues that disproportionately could present themselves between about 2011, and it looks like they don't drop off again until about 2014. So now let's go look at my car and see if the adage about avoiding model years 2010 and 2011 actually holds true. So we'll go here and look at a Toyota Prius. Sure enough, we see pretty big spikes here that seem to indicate some issues around 2010. One of the biggest issues here that I don't actually see mentioned as often when I do sort of this anecdotal research, which is issues with the brakes, issues with the electrical system. But sure enough, we do see this spike here in problems with the engine. And if we are not concerned about a certain category, like if I already know that there's been a recall and the airbags have been fixed, maybe I'm not as worried about that and I just want to focus on the engine issues and powertrain issues. The adage here does seem to be true that for these specific model years, if I am in the market for this, maybe I do want to avoid those specific years of the car. Here we have 2 different tabs for monitoring vehicle fires. So this is an animated one, but with the kind of data and the quantity of data, the streaming is somewhat unreliable. So if you want to manually step through these vehicle fire rates, you can do that in this tab. What we have here is the rates of vehicle fires, so taking into account the absolute number of fires that have been reported, as well as the volume of vehicle. We've set this cutoff here to be 0.04%. Vehicle fires are not all that common, thankfully, but we've set this cutoff here because this is a known problematic vehicle and had a recall for fire safety reasons. You'll also notice here that these tend to come in blocks on a specific day. So it's not like we get one here, two there. They tend to come in all at the same time. So just for the sake of making this demo a little speedier, we can jump to different months here. And let's say we want to jump ahead in time. Let's go to maybe 2018. And the time now is June 2018. And all of a sudden, we've got an issue that seems to be emerging here with the Chevy Bolt. It's gone above sort of a trivial amount of fires here. There may be a problematic pattern. We'll go ahead a few more months in time, all the way to January of 2019. Nothing else has really stood out at this point and crossed that threshold of what we'll consider to be critical. We'll jump forward a couple more months to June 2019. Everything still seems to be fine. And now all of a sudden at the end of 2019, we start to see where there could be another emerging issue. It looks like maybe there are going to be some issues with the Bolt. We're starting to see issues with the 2019 model specifically. So let's see if this is an isolated incident or if there might be some evidence of greater problems that exist. And sure enough, that number continues to go higher. As someone in the market for a 2021 Chevy Bolt, now I'm thinking, is this an issue that is isolated, like the recall? So there's a recall in November of 2020 saying this is an issue and we're going to recall 2017 through 2019 Chevy Bolts. But is this an issue that I need to be worried about, or is it only something that is happening with these earlier models? So multiple different ways that this data can be used, both by the OEM to track these emerging issues and maybe also by the consumer to see, should I be worried? Should I reconsider this purchase? We'll go ahead and we'll just jump to the current time here. And December 2024 is the last that we have data for. And we see that maybe I shouldn't be as worried if I have a later model Bolt, though it still seems to be that we're reporting fires maybe at higher rates than we might with other vehicles that are made around the same time. We actually end up seeing a full recall of all of the first generation of Chevy Bolts from 2017 to 2022, but in fact, all of the batteries do not need to be replaced, and they end up installing some monitoring software to limit the number of batteries that are being replaced. Something interesting that I haven't really addressed here yet is this Chevy Volt issue. It seems to be passing this emerging issue, maybe has set off a flag that an investigation needs to be opened. But is there actually anything wrong, or is this sort of a false flag? GM did end up recalling the Chevy Volt based on a potential fire risk that could happen during crashes. So it's interesting to see this emerging issue on real data and see that we can actually flag things that could be problematic down the road.